guys, it's Steffi from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm here to do my reading wrap up for the week from the 3rd of December to the 9th, and I'm still participating in the Love Was YA Bingo Challenge. So I read 5 books to complete various challenges, and I have now completed one entire line plus a few extra boxes, which is exciting. With those 5 books, I've read 1,664 pages. My yearly reading total is up to 248 books, so I'm well on track to hit 250 before the year is out. I sound really terrible, and I actually feel relatively terrible, so hopefully this will go off reasonably well today. But yeah, just beware, I'm not feeling 100% and haven't been for a couple of days, so this could be interesting. But here are the books that I read this week. The first book that I finished off this week was Freedom Swimmer by Y. Chim. This is a 2016 release from Allen and Unwin. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars, and it was for the Free Space Challenge on my Love Was YA bingo board. This story is historical fiction. It is set during Mao's China, and it is a fictionalized account of the author's father's experiences in China. Our main character Ming lives in a small community town where he has outlived his parents in the famine, and he lives a life working in the fields and doing what he's been asked to do. But then one day they send a whole bunch of the city boys as part of the Communist Party re-education program, and he befriends one of the boys, Li, and it is about their journey as they come to discover what they really want out of life and how they might go about achieving that. This was really powerful and a really interesting look at a time in history that I'm not familiar with. History is not my strong suit, so I'm always grateful for books that illuminate part of history that I might not otherwise have learned about. Then I read The Love Interest by Cal Dietrich. This is a 2017 release from Fable and Friends, and I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. This was for the queer romance square on the Love Was YA bingo board, and it was okay. It's not something that's completely memorable. I did read it at the start of the week and I am struggling a little bit to recall most of the details. However, what I can say is it is the story of 2 boys who have been raised to be love interests. So they've been raised in isolation from the rest of the world and trained to be the best version of themselves within a stereotype of a good or a bad. Essentially, they're spies and they are sent out to try and win the affections of the love interest, who is a young girl who is apparently destined for great things, and the organization that they work for sends out pairs of suitors, and whoever wins the love interest's affections survives, and the person who doesn't is either recycled or killed. And it's an interesting concept, and I actually think I would have liked it, except I don't feel like the writing style connected with me so much, and it just felt a fraction juvenile for my particular tastes. What I will say is it would probably make a really great movie and it would be really funny. But I did like the queer romance in this between the 2 main characters who begin to fall for one another instead of the love interest, which complicates things entirely because they're also, enemies. Overall, it wasn't bad, but it just didn't wow me like I thought it would. Then I read Teens by Louise Mack. This book was originally first published in 1897. This edition was published in 2016, and it was published by Angus and Robertson, which is an imprint of HarperCollins. I read this book for the challenge, a book set in the past, because obviously this was written at the end of the 1800s, and it was centered around a young schoolgirl living in Sydney at the time, and she's just entered school for the first time, and it is the story of her friendship with her best friend and their efforts to create a school newspaper as a way of sharing the things that they love to do, such as writing or their opinions. And it was really just a look at what it was like to be a young girl in school in that particular time period. The 4th book that I read this week is not one I can talk too much about, but it's a book that I received when I went to the YA showcase at the State Library on Tuesday night, and that is Whisper by Lynette Noni. This is her upcoming release, which is due out in May next year. So it's a 2018 release from Pantera Press, and I gave it 4.5 out of stars. I really enjoyed this book, and I cannot tell you too much about it, but probably closer to the release date next year, I will either write up a blog review or I will do a separate video to talk about this book. But suffice to say that I loved this. It reminded me of Shadow Me by Tahira Mafi, but better. and I couldn't put this down. I read it in about 3 hours straight. So I highly, highly recommend this one next year when it comes out. So thank you to Pantera Press and Lynette Noni for providing all of us with copies, and also to Lynette for signing it for me as well, which was awesome. It was lovely to meet her. Oh, and I should say that I swapped that out and read that as my Aussie Spec Fic Square on my Lovers Way bingo, because why not? The last book that I read this week was Zeros by Scott Westerfeld, Margot Lanigan, and Deborah Bianicotti. And this is a book that I've heard a lot of people talk about. It's sort of like a X-Men-y type story. It was published in 2015 by Allen & Unwin. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. And I read it for the Lovers Way Bingo Square Read a Book by 2 or more Australian authors. So there's 3 of them. It was okay. I really liked the powers that the characters had in this book. So it's all about these, you know, teens who have abilities and superpowers, and they call themselves the Zeros because they're not heroes. And I thought there was a really interesting mix of abilities in here that you don't always see in books or even in superhero movies. And I like that some of them are dependent on how many people are around them for them to be effective. That was really fascinating. The storyline was okay. I didn't necessarily connect with all the characters, so you've got about 6 point of views in this story, which is fine. They're not badly done, but if you don't care about all of the characters, then you sort of find yourself skimming through some of them. I found that particularly with Crash, because as much as I really loved her powers, I didn't really connect with her as a character, so it made it a little bit more difficult. I really liked Flicker and Anonymous. They were probably my 2 favorite characters. Really quickly, the story is about, or starts with, a young boy named Scam finding himself in hot water as he accidentally inherits some mob money, and he decides to put it in the bank only to be caught in the middle of a bank robbery. And there he has to talk his way out of a confrontation with one of the bank robbers, and finds himself being questioned by the police, and the other Zeros have to come and bail him out lest he reveal his secrets and potentially their own. And it sort of spirals from there, and it's a good adventure story. I just wish there'd been a little bit more, but I'll probably continue reading Swarm and Nexus, which are the 2nd and 3rd books in the series, but probably not for a little while. But I would like to continue these stories and see where these characters go and what new characters come in and what their abilities are. So these are the books that I read this week. It's a pretty good reading week, if I do say so myself. So we'll see how this next week goes. It's getting closer to the end of the year, so it's a little bit trickier to find time to read because there's so much going on, particularly with work. But I would like to try and get a few more books in before. At the end of this, I'm going to share my little passport entries again so that you can see where everything fits on the bingo board. But until then, I hope that you are having a wonderful, wonderful day, no matter where you are in the world, and I will catch you guys in my next video. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.